Listen to the color of your sound. Listen to Studio Blue Radio.
And yeah, we're back, siamo tornati dopo un po' di musica, sempre dei LYCIA, ovviamente. Tutta la playlist la trovate sul link di Studio Blue Radio e ovviamente segnatevi ogni canzone e ascoltatela. Here we're back with Tara and Flower. Hey, hey. And we were talking about your beautiful period when you are actually into the LYCIA period, and there's a special question actually that one of my colleagues that first talked to you in the first place, my dear friend Carlo, and Carlo was asking to me a thing that it's very interesting actually, because here in Italy the song Pray that is part of this album, and also Desert, where the songs that are here in Italy are very famous. And it was concerning about the fact that in the 80s, of course, the music were hard to find. Like, you had to go to the concert, you had to go, you had to buy the CD or the vinyl if it was for the vinyl, right? And he wanted to ask you, and I think it's an amazing question. What it would be now if LYCIA right now, I know that you do, but what if LYCIA was not founded in 89 in the 80s, but for example in 2021, in 2020, for example.
Yeah, you know what? Mike talks about this all the time. He always says we're either too early or too late.
There you go.
Like
it's a curse. It's a curse.
Like if LYCIA had started a little bit earlier, he probably would have had a very different career. And if we started now, we would have a very different career.
Right.
Because, like you said, it was hard to find anything back then. And especially for anything underground, because mainstream record stores wouldn't cover it, they wouldn't have it or whatever. You didn't get any radio airplay except for maybe college radio. So you really did. It was kind of like a word of mouth thing. Like, you heard about a band from somebody else. And then most of the time, people just kind of dubbed cassettes to each other, which is, that cuts into the band's record sales, obviously.
Yeah.
But we never had a problem with that, because in our mind, it was like, well, I would rather people listen to the music whether they paid for it or not. I think the benefit if LYCIA had come out now as opposed to back then is that, like what we talked about a little earlier, where we could get shows more easily. Of course, hindsight is always 20/20, and we always think like, well, we would do this differently and this differently and this differently. But I think the main difference is just that people have so much easier access to music online. Bands can tour, minus the whole COVID thing, but bands can tour a lot more easily now than they could back in the day. And I think bands have a lot more control over their career now than they used to. So I think, but everything happens the way it happens for a reason.
For a reason, right? So, absolutely.
But I think the main difference would be just the easily accessible access to music and to see bands playing live. So, but we're thinking about prepping some shows. So who knows where we'll be in the next year. Just kind of throwing that out there, but maybe I'll get to meet you in person at some point.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It will be so nice, and I will draw an illustration for you guys. Absolutely.
I would love that.
Oh my God, yes, that would be lovely.
Yes,
so
it
that's
would.
It's a beautiful answer that you gave. Very it is what it is, but we can do this. All right. So for the Italian listeners that are listening to us, and thank you that you are here listening to us. La domanda di Carlo, il mio carissimo collega che saluto, ciao Carlo, il nostro Charlie Jump, che è con noi il lunedì sera, quindi se lo volete ascoltare, ascoltate il format del lunedì sera alle 9. Lui chiedeva, siccome nel lontano 99 lui ascoltava qui in Italia la canzone Pray and Desert, e ovviamente lui chiedeva che all'epoca, giustamente negli anni 80, non c'era internet, quindi cosa sarebbe accaduto in un ipotetico futuro se per esempio i LYCIA fossero nati nel 2021, nel 2020, e ovviamente Tara diceva, sai, ogni cosa c'è un motivo perché capita, e se noi siamo nati adesso o siamo nati negli anni 80 c'è un motivo, perché dovevamo arrivare, questa musica doveva arrivare a tot persone, doveva arrivare a quella persona, che secondo me è un bellissimo concetto applicabile per tantissime cose, e diciamo che non hanno regrets, non hanno rimorsi, perché diciamo è vero che oggi la musica è molto più fruibile, più facile avere delle vendite maggiori, però all'epoca è molto più bello, era molto più bello, c'era una concezione della musica differente, la mentalità era diversa, per certi versi era buona e per certi versi magari un poco meno. I would love to ask you, my dear Tara, what about the period from 96 and 99 for all the band, before talking about the solo projects?
Sure.
Would you like to do a kind of the resume, because you did a lot in this period, like you never stopped. For real, because you did a lot of albums all in the studio, and for real, that's amazing actually. Also because after I want to start with, for example, with the fact that after the Burning Circle and the Dust, there was the album called in 1996. And it was the representing a new sound for you. It was very black, was very dark, very you know, the true dark wave. What do you think about this album, for example, from your perspective right now?
Yeah, so Cold is probably the album, like whenever I meet someone and they don't know anything about us and they say, well, what album I should start with, I always tell them Cold. I think right. Cold was such a good culmination between Mike, Dave, and myself, because after the Burning Circle, we toured together. Yeah. And then Mike and Dave moved to Ohio, to where I lived, because it was a better location for touring around the country. And we all lived together. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of tension in the band between us and Dave.
Why?
Well, because first of all, you lock people in a very small car.
Okay.
And they're around each other 24 hours of the day. Mm-hmm. And Mike and I kind of had a different trajectory of what we wanted to do than Dave. So we wanted to tour nonstop, and Dave didn't really want to do that. Right. So there was a lot of tension in the band, and like when, Mike, we wanted to record, like we recorded in our house. We didn't go into a studio. And so every day it was kind of like we had to wake Dave up, like, come on, man, it's time to record. So there was like a lot, and we've since worked through all this. We get along great now. But at the time, there was so much tension. We didn't really talk to each other except for to talk about LYCIA. And so, again, at that time also was when the Typo Negative tour came up. Dave didn't want to go, which put Mike and I in a spot, because we knew that we needed to take that opportunity. That was very important. And so there was all this tension. Dave just didn't want to play live anymore, but that was the direction we were going. And so we recorded this album. It was Mike, Dave, and I living in this apartment. And it was the coldest winter. Like we had blizzards, and it was very cold. And so while we were recording, we had this forest behind our house that was very bleak looking. And so all of this together kind of culminated in this sound that happened with Cold. Yeah. Yeah. So I think the mood in the house is very well reflected in the mood of the album, where it had this like icy cold, but it's so lush and beautiful at the same time. So that's probably overall I guess would probably be my favorite LYCIA. I shouldn't say that because that's not necessarily true. But that's the album I tell people to start. Yeah, well, it's like trying to pick your favorite kid. I mean, they're all good, but that's my record that I say if you don't know who LYCIA is, start with Cold. But yeah, there was just it was a very odd time for us because we had all these opportunities coming our way, but then one member of the band didn't want to do the opportunities. So yeah, it was difficult.
Finding balance between you, Mike, and Dave. I get it because you were different heads. So I get what you're saying. But of course you did it. So I'm very glad for that. So, Cold è l'album che è uscito esattamente nel 96, è l'album che rappresenta il sound più nero, più scuro della band, e questo nome non è dato a caso perché era un periodo che era appena iniziato, diciamo, l'idea alla band era stata appena presentata l'idea di poter aprire i concerti di Type O Negative e tante altre bellissime opportunità che